Moccasin Trail, Chapter 4. Dusk was gathering over the broad, sloping area between river and hills where the wagon train was encamped. There was a curious, disheveled air about the place. Wagons angled this way and that under dripping trees. Oxen and cattle bawled mournfully. Campfires sparked here and there through the gloom, and people moved about them wearily. It's ever family for itself, Rutledge was saying as he led the way up over the muddy, even ground. The train's busted up. Folks got to tackle this gorge the best way they know how. Ain't no way to go it together. Johnny and me's been planning to team up on our raft. Build it big enough for both families if we can. I reckon we'll find him at my wagon now. We was going to talk about it some more this evening. Jim, moving silent as a shadow at his side, with Moki close at his heel and Buckskin the mule chomping behind, was grateful for the quiet, steady rumble of the man's voice, though he only half listened to the words. His mouth was dry. Would he know Johnny after all these years? He groped after fragments of memory, a tousled dark head in the next cot, loud arguments about chores and bean shooters or who broke the window, low-voiced talk after the candles were out at night. But Johnny's face remained blurred and featureless, save for black eyes with thick black lashes. How far away it all was. Been a mighty hard trail for Johnny, for all of 'em, since your mother died, Rutledge was saying. They're fine kids. I've raised 3 myself, and I know. Ain't a soul in the wagon train wouldn't stake his last ox on Johnny Keith. And Sally, well, she's got more grit than any man I know. Sally, a 7-year-old with a mop of yellow curls, a childish treble. Mama, them boys, they woke the baby. Jim stopped walking. Baby? Yes, Dan'l. The letter had mentioned him. Me and Sally and Dan'l is all that's left. The 3 of them, on their own, from the Sweetwater to the Cascades. A sense of guilt, powerful as it was unexpected, filled Jim suddenly. It alarmed and bewildered him. His fingers tightened on his rifle. His glance flashed over trees, sullen sky, mud, and trampled grass, then lit on Rutledge's burly figure, half turning to wait for him a few steps ahead. Something wrong, son? Came the deep, quiet voice. Jim shook his head. Nothing was wrong. He was just jumpy. He moistened stiff lips and moved forward. Let's get on with it. How much further? Just yonder. That's my wagon by the pine trees. Now, don't let that bunch of people bother you none. Looks like a crowd, but it ain't nobody but my family and a few folks from our train. Just neighbors dropping in. Likely to bore or something. Jim hardly heard a low, reassuring flow of words as they neared the wagon. A snatch of melody drifted toward them on the chilly wind, and Rutledge chuckled. Yep, he's there all right. That's Johnny, son. That's him singing. Hear that banjo? I tell you, that banjo's seen a lot of us through some rough times. The melody came and went, half lost in the noise of the river and the spurts of conversation coming from one direction of the wagon, winding in and out among the other sounds like a bright thread of embroidery. The voice was lusty and careless, interrupted now and again by little flurries of laughter. Johnny's voice, deep as a man's. He'd be 17 by now. Jim tied his animals to one of the pines, his eyes on the fire crackling over there, on the figures moving back and forth or lounging under pine trees. He could smell food cooking, hear scraps of talk. Now where's that clasp knife? La, I had it right here. It's the cattle worries me, Ned. They can't ride no raft. We'll have to... Sam, give me a lift with this. Then Jim felt Rutledge's hand on his shoulder as they pushed through a stretch of low bushes, and a few minutes later he stepped full into that blaze of firelight. Heads turned and talk trailed off. The music died. Dazzled by the glare, Jim flung a confused glance around the ring of faces, seeing only blurs. It's your brother, Johnny, he heard Rutledge saying. Your brother. He's come. The fire snapped, sounding like a gunshot. Then a tall boy rose slowly to his feet and stood there, the banjo trailing from one hand. For an instant, Jim forgot to breathe. He could have sworn he was looking straight at his long-dead Uncle Adam Russell. He stared at the long legs, wide shoulders, tumbled black hair. They were Uncle to the life. So were the jutting nose and straight dark brows, but the furrows of 40 years of hard living were absent. These cheeks were smooth with youth, and instead of Uncle's hawk eyes, here were those thick-lashed black ones he remembered. They were going over him slowly, numbly, from coo feather to moccasins. "Good Lord Almighty," said Jonathan. Something in his tone killed the eager greeting on Jim's lips. With an effort, he got out one word. "Hello, Johnny." He took an uncertain step forward, stopped, then took another. Johnny suddenly dropped the banjo. "Jim," he said hoarsely. "Jim!" Then he was moving too, kicking aside a heap of brushwood that lay in his path, somehow conveying the impression that had a mountain stood there, he would have kicked that aside too. His hand reached out. It was square and muscular and bony like the rest of him, burned dark by months of travel. In another stride, Jim was beside him, gripping it. For a moment, they stood silent, taut as two bowstrings, staring at each other. Jonathan spoke jerkily at last. "Jim, by all that's holy, never reckon to see you again in this life. Ain't sure you're real. What's the matter? You're shakin'." "Well, thunder, you gimme a turn. You're the spit of Uncle—" "Oh, yeah, I've heard that. Mother used to say so." The words trailed off. Suddenly, neither could find anything to say. Johnny freed his hands and wiped both palms on his shabby jeans in a gesture Jim found vividly familiar. Johnny used to do that as a child, whenever he was wrought up, crammed full of something he couldn't handle. He exploded into speech. "Mean to tell me you got that letter of mine? Or did you just happen to turn up here?" "Got the letter." "Criminy! How? All that country? I figured that trapper'd never find you, even if you was still alive. How'd he—" "Sent Injuns with it. Hervey knowed where I was within 100 mile or so." 100 mile? Jonathan laughed nervously. "You talk like they was a signpost on every mountain." "Is once you get to know him. We'll start feeling easier pretty soon," Jim thought. "We just got to get used to each other again, that's all." Was it a rough trip out?" he asked. Johnny shrugged. "We got here. Wagon turned over once coming down Windlass Hill. Nearly lost an ox crossing the Snake." "Some river, that Snake." "Yeah, I don't know a worse ford anywheres. That ox of mine, that blamed old goat, Johnny's voice went on jerkily, but Jim lost track of what he was saying because Johnny's glance was going over him, this time clinging to his braids and his medicine bundle and his claw necklace with a fierce intensity. "By the Almighty, you've done some changing," Johnny said slowly. "What in the name of—" But he didn't say what he'd started to. Instead, he stirred, darted a sideways glance at the ring of faces around them, and muttered, "Say, let's get out of here." His words produced an awkward flurry among the watchers. Women began to bustle toward cookpots. Men became absorbed in the examination of wagon wheels and their own muddy boots. Jonathan strode off to fetch his banjo, moving with that brusque, shoving gait of his. He walked like a man up to his knees in swift water. Jim, watching every move, noticed that he was limping. On the way back, Johnny stopped beside Rutledge. "We'll have that talk of ours later, shall we?" Sure. I'll come around after supper, Johnny." "Yeah, do. Bring Ned." Jonathan moved on, beckoning Jim with a jerk of his head. "Our wagon ain't far, just over yonder a piece. Sally's there." Jim nodded his head, a ferment of unfamiliar emotions. This young brother of his had grown up into somebody, all right. He thought of Rutledge's words, "Ain't a man in our wagon train that wouldn't stake his last ox on Johnny Keith." And Johnny's own grim, "Well, we got here." Johnny would get where he set out to get. You could tell that from his walk and the set of his chin. There was a streak of iron in him that hadn't been there when they were youngsters. And there was something else, too, something that made him look less like Uncle at times and more like Pa. Johnny could throw a look at you that was just like a blow. Maybe it wasn't going to be easy, this coming home. The thought took root and grew disquietingly, all but blotting out Jim's familiar world of sensation. The river's thunder, a pine branch that caught at his rifle, the shape of a twig under his moccasin, all had curious remoteness, as if his body and mind had temporarily parted company. He was almost surprised when they stepped past the wagon into the chilly dusk to find that busy corner of his brain functioning as usual, automatically reporting a north wind and the scampering passage of a squirrel. He frowned. Running into Johnny after all these years was kind of a shock, that was all. They'd both changed, sure. Nothing so queer about that. It'd been a thundering long time. "You got any belongings?" Jonathan was asking as they started back through the scrubby brushes. "Yeah, tied my critters to a tree over this-a-way. I'll fetch 'em." Jim swerved to the right, where Buckskin's pale shape loomed ahead in the dusk. But he slowed and then stood still. One of the many unasked questions was pounding, too hard to be delayed. "How'd it happen? With Mother?" he blurted. "Injuns or—" Jonathan shook his head. "She was sick, back in Missouri, Jim. One reason we left. She kept having this fever. Seemed like she was getting better for a while, crossing the plains, but then, I don't know, I guess it was just too hard." "It's hard country," Jim muttered. After a moment, he added, "Wished I'd been there." "So do I," Jonathan said grimly. She couldn't talk about nothing else. "She wanted to see me?" Jonathan turned slowly and looked at him as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Yeah," he said at last. "She wanted to see you. She never quit wanting to." They stared at each other a minute. I wished I'd known that," Jim mumbled at last. "I didn't know." He cleared his throat roughly and started walking again. "How come you head out here anyways?" "Oh, a lot of reasons." Johnny shoved alongside him, swinging the banjo. "We lost the farm when Pa died, 3 years back, and—" "Thunder, you did? Where you been living?" "Here and there. Any place I could find work. Council Bluffs, St. Louis. I loaded riverboats a while there. Done farm work up around Independence. Kept hearing Oregon talk, free land. Mild winters and all, sounded mighty good. We finally just packed up and started. By gor, I'll say you got nerve." Jonathan smiled one-sidedly. "About all we got now. Broke, clothes all wore out." He halted and turned, the smile gone. "I can't even get the land now Mother's gone. You got to be 18 to sign them papers, and I lack 6 blasted months." He hesitated, then burst out, "Jim, you aim to get that land for us?" "Why, sure, if that's what you want." The depth of Johnny's relief showed in every line of his body. "It's what I want, all right. By golly, it's all I need, just that land. I'll do the rest with no favors from anybody." Come on, let's get moving. I want to tell Sally." Jim led the way, wondering at such enthusiasm for a job he wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. Farming. Starting from scratch, too. Clearing land. He wondered if Johnny knew how thick the trees grew in that valley. Then he decided it wouldn't matter if they grew 3 to the inch. Not to Johnny, it wouldn't. Preoccupied, he forgot to warn Moki as they stepped around the last thicket. The dog glimpsed a stranger lurking behind his master. He drew his own conclusions. With a snarl, he lunged straight at Jonathan's throat. Jim swung an arm violently backward, sending Johnny staggering. Next instant, he had Moki by the scruff. A sharp swat and a sharper command restored discipline. "What the devil?" Jonathan grunted. "You keep timber wolves for pets?" "It's a dog. Stay there, Moki." Jim brushed past, suddenly irritable to yank the mare's bridle free. He'd had about enough remarks about Moki today, but he could hardly blame Jonathan. "Moki ain't used to so many people around," he said, by way of apology. "He'll be all right once he gets to sniff you." "Well, suppose we get it over with right now. I'd as soon keep my skin whole." Jim smiled briefly. "All right, come here, Moki." With a firm grasp on the coarse fur, He allowed Moki to investigate Jonathan's hands and clothing, talking softly meanwhile in crow, and waiting until the dog's bristling died down and the plumpy tail began to thump amiably. "He'll be friends now," he said, straightening. "What was that you was saying to him?" Jonathan demanded. "Oh, just calming him down." That was Injun talk, wasn't it?" Jim suddenly wished he'd use English. "Yeah, crow." He waited uncomfortably, but Jonathan turned back to the dog. "Guess he's decided I'm all right. Let's go." He took a step, then stopped. "What about Sally? He's gonna jump at her like that too?" "No, I'll watch him." The doubt in Jonathan's expression made Jim add, "I won't bite her neither." Johnny laughed and turned away hastily, but the flush that crept over his cheekbones told Jim he'd struck home. Jim knew that look. He'd had it turned on him many times, not always by bourgeois. Usually it amused him and suited his purposes. This time it was wrong, all wrong. He tugged on Buckskin's bridle and they headed southeast, away from the river. As they walked along in the gray half-light, he let his eyes travel covertly over the threadbare shirt and jeans, the wide shoulders and flat belly that belonged to grown-up Johnny. How much of that iron had been in him when they'd started west? There was a lot of country between here and Missouri. You forgot what it could do to people until you saw its mark on somebody who wasn't used to it. If it didn't make wolf's meat out of them, it whittled them down to bone and muscle like this. And all because they fought it like an enemy instead of learning to live with it. You had to give in, fit yourself to it. Injuns knew how. They'd always known. Mountain men found out mighty soon, but bourgeois were too stubborn or too proud to change their ways. They had nerve all right, but they were fools to make so much extra trouble for themselves. Looked like Johnny had extra trouble all right. Foot trouble. Jim shot a glance downward. Factory boots. Broken and half gone. Johnny was limping bad and trying to hide it. Still fighting. "What's the matter with your feet?" Jim grunted. Jonathan gave a short laugh. "Well, ain't the matter with them. Or what ain't the matter with them?" "You got oxen to haul you, ain't you?" "They haul our stuff. We mostly stroll alongside." "Some stroll," thought Jim. 2,000 miles. Why don't you ride horseback?" he demanded. "Don't own a horse." Jonathan's eyes strayed to Buckskin, as they had often in the past few minutes. "I see you got yourself a good one. Where'd you buy her?" "Buy?" Jim repeated. He almost laughed. The crows, himself amongst them, were the most talented horse stealers on the plains. "You can't buy no horse like that one." "Where'd you get her then?" "Stole her, of course." Jonathan stopped in his tracks. "You what?" "Now then, by Gore," thought Jim with satisfaction. "That impresses him. Why, I stole her from a Crow warrior," he added in case Johnny might understand the coup. He waited, with an eagerness that surprised himself, for dawning respect to break over his brother's face. But something was wrong. "What about the mule?" Johnny said. "Did you steal that too?" "No. Give 30 plews for it. Taos Valley." "30 what?" "Plews. Beaver." Don't he know nothing? Thought Jim. "Oh, beaver." Jonathan continued to stand there, studying him with that peculiar expression. "Maybe Johnny hadn't heard about the crows," Jim elaborated. "'Tain't as easy as it sounds. Tom River, he used to say it took a crow to steal a Comanche's horse, and there warn't Injun or white could steal a crow's. Well, I done it. Cut her right off in his lodge while he was just settin' inside." Still no odd admiration dawned on Johnny's face. "Who's Tom Rivers?" he murmured. "Trapper I know." Jim turned and started on again. Why, he didn't know Johnny at all anymore. They were strangers. What was Johnny thinking anyhow? Jim was suddenly desperately homesick for Tom and for the old drifting, uncomplicated life, and the smell of beaver tail bubbling over the fire. His stomach twisted with hunger, and he realized he was smelling food from all directions. He could spot 3 or 4 wagons among the trees nearby, and each one had a pot of something cooking. Not beaver tail, not anything he recognized. though the odor nudged something far back in his memory. He glanced around, about to ask Jonathan what it was, and felt a twinge of sympathy. Johnny was sniffing hard. He looked nigh starved, all right. Likely the others were too. The others. Would Sally stare at him that queer way? He wished he could think what that baby looked like. He turned, struck by a sudden thought. By gor, that little one, Dan'l, how old is he anyway? 11. 11! And Sally would be 15. Jim made another hasty mental readjustment and found himself staring once more into the yawning gap of those 9 years. It seemed to be getting wider all the time. What's he look like, Johnny? Oh, just a young'un, growing out of his clothes. Got yaller hair like mother's. Jim slowed his mind, full of a sudden clear image, the little golden-haired boy at the post. At the same moment, Jonathan swung around. I bet you've seen him already. He was just telling us earlier about some tangle with a wolf and an inch. There was an abrupt, strained silence. Jim stood there grimly, watching a dark flush appear over Jonathan's face. All right, it was out in the open. Best get it cleared up once and for all. A wolf and an Injun, is that it? He said. Yeah, said Jonathan. Suddenly he burst out. The kid made a mistake, and I can't blame him. You do look Injun. Blamed if you don't. More Injun than white. What happened to you anyway, Jim? I don't know you no more. Where you been? How you been living all this time? Criminy, you just drop out of sight and never even say goodbye? I thought you was dead long since. I just knew you was, 'cause you never come home nor sent word nor nothing. Why don't you tell me? Ain't much to tell, Johnny. They's plenty from the look of you. Let's have it. You run off with Uncle, didn't you? We figured that much. Yeah, up the Missouri into Blackfoot country, then across into Absaroka, and out again. We trapped about a year, I reckon. Bill Hervey was with us and some others. We was working up along Wind River when we got separated. Separated? How? Well, a grizzly busted up our camp one night. Uncle and the others got away, and I didn't. I killed the critter, though, and after a while some crows run across me laying there. Lucky for me, they tucked me home with them and made some big medicine, and I got well. Took a while, though. Most all summer. Criminy, Jim, you lived with them devils a whole summer? What'd you mean, devils? Snapped Jim. Johnny's eyes widened, then gradually went expressionless. He murmured, Sorry. I lived with them 6 year, Jim said. Johnny didn't move or answer, but he looked as if he'd been hit in the face. Jim took a long breath and went on. Well, then, a couple years ago, I run away from them too, and I started trapping again with Tom Rivers. But it weren't like it used to be. There ain't no beaver nowadays. The trade's done for. Tom and me, we was breaking camp for good, and I didn't know where I was heading. Then your letter come, and I lit down here to get it read to me, and... Read to you? Exploded Jonathan. Good criminy, Jim. Pa taught you to read. I forgot. Thunderation, Johnny. There weren't no books where I was. Jonathan's shoulders sagged. He muttered, Go on. Everything I say is wrong, thought Jim. He shrugged carelessly. That's all, he grunted. After a while, Johnny turned away, rubbing his palm on his jeans in that old gesture. Yeah, well, it's quite a bit, ain't it? Like I said. Well, let's get on. He started walking again, toward a wagon half hidden in a clump of straggly pines. It had a big, triangular stain on its top, and in the silence of the short walk, Jim memorized every dreary drip and curve of its outline. When they were almost there, Jonathan stopped and spoke in a strained voice. I think I'd better go first, Jim. Kinda warned Sally you're coming. She don't remember you at all, you know, and... Go ahead, Jim snapped. He stood there waiting, mechanically noting the scurry of a lizard, a couple of blurred and stubby footprints near an overturned stone, and the strong smell of oxen. He fingered his braids, wishing he had switches to work into them so they'd hang looped and glossy to his knees like a warrior's ought to, since Johnny kept staring at them anyway. The devil with Johnny, he thought restlessly. I don't care what they're saying over yonder. One of the footprints had a long, wiggly indentation across the heel, and there were a number of slits in the earth nearby, as if a knife had been repeatedly jabbed in and pulled out. Jim thought, I only come here 'cause the medicine said to. Anyhow, I don't need to worry about no bourgeois. I'll get 'em into shape and through the gorge and claim their land like I said I would. Then after that, I'll lift my own traps, and they can lift theirs. No matter to me what Johnny thinks. Yonder in that bare space was where the oxen had been grazing. Somebody had moved them around the wagon not 5 minutes ago. There was mud still crumbling into a deep hoof track. Jim made an exhaustive study of it, burying far, far down in his heart, the knowledge that what Johnny thought might matter more than anything that ever mattered before.